We are living neath the great big dipper. We are washed by the very same rain. We're all swimming in the stream together, some in power and some in pain. We can worship this ground we walk on, cherishing the beings that we live beside. Loving spirits will live forever. We're all swimming to the other side. When I first heard this song, I heard this standing in a circle at one of Harvard Divinity School's weekly choir rehearsals. Standing side by side with my peers of all sorts of backgrounds, musical abilities, beliefs, and faith traditions, the lyrics became embodied in this incredible circle of voices. This holy moment of music making that gave us a glimpse at something far greater than just ourselves. As we sang, many of us were moved to tears by the gentle words and music. And to this day, it remains one of my favorite moments in my time in divinity school, reflecting radical types of communities and spaces. Spaces where I have felt that I was welcomed to bring my full self and that I truly belonged. It also makes me realize just how much I miss things like singing together in church and the sacred moments that we can create together when we're in person. More importantly, though, moments like these point to something special that I know to be true of Unitarian Universalism and the kinds of spaces and communities that we hope to create. Now, I suspect that I'm not alone in having glimpses like this one at something sacred and larger than myself. You too have glimpse moments like this. Moments like singing together in a packed sanctuary on a Sunday, a singing with a swell and a hum that reaches us to our very core. Moments like standing in awe under a clear night sky, gazing up at the wide moon and the great expanse of stars overhead. Moments like holding the hand of a loved one who is dying, bearing witness to their sacred and special life as it enters into its final moments. Sometimes we can even feel this in common everyday moments, like in slowing down to enjoy conversations with friends over a shared meal or a simple cup of coffee. Now, I believe these glimpse moments go beyond just glimpses at wonder and connection. Instead, these glimpses offer us a peek at what we hold so dear and sacred as Unitarian Universalists. These are glimpses at the very power of life itself. And while we see a world out there that is so deeply hurting, there are still glimpses that we have now at the beloved community that we so desperately dream to create. In exploring March's theme of empowerment, I want to speak to you today about these sacred glimpse moments. Some of you have already heard a lot about beloved community already. And the concept of beloved community is something I hold central to my ministry and calling. It's also the subject of my master's work as I'm finishing up my final semester in divinity school. Now, what I find so hard about language of beloved community is how it can be difficult to envision or even imagine. It might seem as this really abstract idea or something that is far beyond the reaches of our own imaginations. Some of us might look skeptically at beloved community as something that really doesn't seem practical or even achievable in our lifetime. Some of us might be wondering if the arc really does bend toward justice. And even so, I believe that the beloved community isn't really this far off concept that's too difficult for us to understand. Instead, I believe that these everyday sacred glimpses show us that the beloved community is actually real to us and present with us in the here and now. Ultimately, this is at the heart of Unitarian Universalism and our theology, or how it is that we make meaning, or what it is that we hold sacred. We believe the beloved community is more than just a goal of how life should or ought to be. It's an experience that we have available even now. These glimpses at the beloved community help to sustain us as we work faithfully and tirelessly against injustice and strive to make this world yet a better place. However, even in the wake of this powerful prophetic vision, we as a tradition are facing many growing pains. We're still trying to sort out what it is that we believe about ourselves as a faith and who we are still yet becoming. Though many of us within Unitarian Universalism have heard of this idea of beloved community, we're not yet all on the same page. We're trying to make sense of our history while also answering the calls to end white supremacy and racial injustice within ourselves and our institutions. This has become clear in a report from the UUA's Commission on Institutional Change, a committee that examines the structures of both power and whiteness in Unitarian Universalism. You might even remember this report from Stephanie's sermon back in February. In their latest report titled Widening the Circle of Concern, the Commission named the importance in these times of centering theology in our tradition. In their words, we need to articulate a theology grounded in our Unitarian Universalist principles and sources of inspiration, developing a shared theology that centers on helping to unearth, manifest, and point the way toward liberation is for our collective flourishing. This theology will also call us to be accountable to the legacies of our past deeds and the work of an equitable future. In short, we have a deep need for a common faith and a better way of speaking about that shared faith. And speaking about the beloved community this morning, I want to offer this theology of glimpsing the sacred as a theology that meets and answers this call. I believe that the beloved community is a thread that can unite each one of us across this beautiful and shared faith, no matter how different our personal beliefs and spiritualities might be. We are at a pivotal moment in our movement where we are deciding who we want to be and how it is that we are leading this faith into the future for generations to come. We need a better way of saying what it is exactly that we believe. And the beloved community is both the world that we are building and an experience that we already know through these sacred glimpses. This is one way we might name the core of our theology. Now, our reading from earlier by the Reverend Jennifer Nordstrom that Matt read for us, Injustice on Earth, gives us a beautiful vision for what beloved community looks like. In her description of this community, she imagines a world in which we live in integrity with the earth and one another. She names that we don't take more than we need, and that we live in tune with nature's seasons and cycles. Likewise, we live in integrity with one another, where we have diverse and vibrant cultures that teach us how and about what it is to be human without prejudice or hierarchy. Free from violence or exploitation, we live in tune with the rhythms of our own hearts as we laugh and sing together, celebrating the sacred joys of living. What I find so moving about this powerful vision is that it speaks to what we do here in Unitarian Universalist communities. We covenant together to be spaces where we can bring our fullest selves, leaving no part about who we are behind or at the door. We strive to live in right relationship with one another and the entire world around us. And we join our hearts together on life's journey to celebrate life in all of its trials and tribulations, as well as its joys and sorrows. We know what beloved community is because we first experienced what it means to belong. This is what is so special about belonging to a Unitarian Universalist community. However, we also know that our communities aren't perfect. In contrast to this greater vision, we see just how far we have to go in order to get there. We recognize the many ways that white supremacy continues to pervade our communities and groups. And we long for multicultural communities that reflect this shared theology that we hold so central and dear. Communities that are welcoming to Black, Indigenous people, and people of color. We hope for a greater acceptance and embrace of queer and trans people in our congregations as we ensure that no single person feels alone or left out. We are growing to be better, and our faith teaches us that such vibrant, dynamic communities are indeed possible. When we do this right in our communities, we make opportunities for holy encounters, for people to feel loved and accepted just as they are in all that they are. And what we also know is that doing this right in our communities takes both intentionality and practice. However, the beloved community isn't some new idea that's emerged in recent years. This is a vision that also is something that comes from our Universalist roots as a faith. Our Universalist forebears believed in a greater love that holds every single one of us. And in their view, no person was outside of the bounds of this love. While historically they might call this greater love God, our Universalist ancestors pointed to that very thing that Frederick Douglass, as a humanist, named as glimpses of what he might call God. For our Universalist ancestors, ultimately what mattered wasn't some sense of salvation in the afterlife, though this was an important and defining theology. Instead, they believed that salvation mattered in this life. They held a faith that taught that though this world might be marked with pain, tragedy, and injustice, there is still good news. In the end, this world is still savable and indeed is worthy of saving. Universalism tells us of a circle of love that embraces every single one of us, no matter who we are or where we are on life's journey. This widening circle also shows us just how much working toward justice and liberation in this life matters, especially as we work to take care of those who are most at the margins. Our faith calls us to build a longer table, inviting those who are different from ourselves to yet pull up a chair. Returning again to the Commission's report, they write, "A universalist theology of liberation for our present day centers our capacity to be sanctuaries of radical truth-telling and abundant compassion, so that the all-embracing love at the center of our tradition can serve to make all of us more whole." If we are serious about growing this great faith, and I believe that we are, we need to have a better way of sharing this faith and its good news of love and liberation. Imagine what might be possible for this faith if we truly choose to center this potent theology of radical welcome, love, and inclusion. In our Time for All Ages this morning, read wonderfully by Lori and Joel, we see the power in making beloved spaces where we're welcomed to be our fullest selves. For Kelp the unicorn, who thought his entire life that he was a narwhal, he found a community that saw him and loved him exactly as he was. Kelp's community rallied to support him, and in the end, he learned what it meant to belong. Kelp experienced a glimpse of living in beloved community and right relationship with Kelp's neighbors. And returning to that opening moment that I shared with you from our beginning, of singing together with beloved friends, getting a glimpse at the beloved community to come through this sacred shared moment. There is so much power in these moments and spaces for connection that we can yet still experience. For myself, I was lucky in that becoming a Unitarian Universalist quite literally saved my life. I was lucky that I experienced a Unitarian Universalism that held me in all that I was, and that this powerful experience of beloved community would eventually call me to bring this to others in my life and ministry. It breaks my heart that there still are folks out there who aren't feeling welcomed to experience our life saving faith and theology, and that there are still some who feel that they don't belong, who are left wondering if we really will make a space at the table for them to bring their fullest selves. Our faith calls us to draw and extend the circle wider, and I invite you to join me in cultivating the shared faith. Our good news can't afford to be locked up in empty words of welcome, and instead, we must be the ones to do the work. We have a life saving faith and theology that needs to be shared out now more than ever. So this morning, I leave you with this blessing. May this theology transform our hearts, minds, and spirits. May we be ready to pursue this great promise of the beloved community still on the horizon. And when we are weary in the face of anguish, pain, and injustice, may these glimpse moments that we get at the world yet to come sustain us on the journey. We can worship this ground we walk on, cherishing the beings that we live beside. Loving spirits will live forever. We're all swimming to the other side. May it be so.